All right, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Creative Christian Podcast. I'm your host, Bailey Wishart, and today I have the absolute honor of introducing our guest as always. She is a graduate of Wichita State University and a product of the incredible internship program over at Life Church in Edmond, Oklahoma. She recently made the trip out west to take on the role of production manager at one of Christ Church of the Valley's 18 Phoenix Valley locations, and I am also honored to call her a very good friend. So I'm so excited to welcome Alex Simpson to the show. Alex, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I know that we've gotten to kind of talk a little bit about just our collective interests in, church production and the arts and all that type of stuff. Obviously, we share that in common. That's kind of how our friendship kicked off, but I haven't really gotten to dive super deep with you yet in our friendship talking about this. I think at the granular detail we're going to talk about today. So I'm excited to do that, and even better that we get to do it on camera. So I love to just kick off every episode just by diving into our guest story, just first and foremost, just kind of get to know you, help our audience get to know you. So how did you find faith? How did you get started in the creative arts? And what was the point where those two things really started to intersect in your life?
So I grew up in a smaller Presbyterian church in Edmond, Oklahoma. I started going there around second or third grade, so about when I can remember going to church. And the first thing I can remember about attending that church is doing the children's musical. So our church did a musical every year for the kids. And I was already super into like theater and art and everything. That was just like my niche when I was growing up. So my parents put me in the children's musical and I absolutely loved it. I did it all throughout elementary school.
That's
But
awesome.
our church had a really like big emphasis on like the arts and getting kids involved with that as well. So that was super, super
That's
great.
awesome.
But yeah, growing up, I did theater. That was like my main thing. And then I really loved singing and drawing and stuff like that. So in middle and high school, I was really involved in choir and theater. And so that's kind of what translated into like what my interests were at church. Starting in high school, I joined the youth worship band and I was a singer for that for a couple of years. While I was in high school, I started to get really involved with my youth group, and part of that was over the summer we would go on mission trips or like camp trips. In my junior year, we started going to a camp called Generate. It's hosted by YM360. It's a great camp. Essentially, what it is a company like YM360 and Generate hosts a location. It's like, hey, churches bring your youth groups and we'll host you guys and we'll do all the activities and worship and stuff like that. And so
Cool.
the first camp that I went to was in South Padre Island, Texas. And it was at a conference center, and we made it a whole like missions thing and did some serving while we were down there. But it was just a great experience, and that was really my first experience in like live Christian worship settings, and I thought it was like super fun as like, a junior in high school. Like you're just jumping around being crazy, like it's like a concert. It's great.
Right.
The word awesome. Ed Newton of CBC, Community Bible Church. It's in one of those Texas cities. We'll circle back around to him later, because this is kind of like looking back on it, like where the Lord started kind of opening doors for me. I always like was involved. My senior year, I started on the video team at my church, which was like one camera, a P2Z camera, and like 2 channels of switching was what I was doing. But I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I was going to college at that point. Like I was like committed to Wichita State University for tech theater. And I was like, if the theater thing just doesn't work, or if I'm in between gigs, like I can always work at a church. But it was never like a serious thing that I ever considered. I was like, churches have tech, churches have sound consoles. That's kind of what I do. So like if I'm like in between my theater gigs, like that's always a fallback that I can have.
Yeah. It's like a backup option. Plan B.
The Lord it was a plan B at the time, but did I know? So I got to college. So I'm from Oklahoma, so it's about 2 hours away to Wichita State. And I struggled very hard to find a church community while I was there.
Yeah, it's hard in college.
I visited a few churches like my first couple weeks of freshman year. Like I was trying to do the church shopping thing, which is difficult. And it's even more difficult to do by yourself, because the friends that I made in college were not necessarily churchgoers. And so I was trying to find a church group community thing on my own, which is intimidating and it's scary and all of the things. About midway through my freshman year, I kind of just stopped going to church. I was still active somewhat in my faith. I was like reading my Bible occasionally and listening to worship music occasionally, but it was just like a rough couple of months. And then halfway through my freshman year, COVID happened. So I got shipped back home. Like, I was a second semester freshman when this happened. I had applied to be one of the technical staff at Generate for the summer of 2020. Yeah, because I needed a job, and I was like, it's a summer job and it's tech based, and I love Generate. Like, it was a great option. So I applied and I got it, and I was supposed to be a lighting designer the summer of 2020.
Jeez.
Obviously, camp did not happen. So I did not go. Also, I would have absolutely died being a lighting designer at that moment, because I knew almost nothing about lighting. Which would have been interesting. But so I applied my freshman year for the summer of 2020. Summer 2020 didn't happen. I went back to school my sophomore year, and it was all online. Still was not in a church community. And I was very sporadically going.
Are you back in Wichita at this point doing school online, or are you doing school online from Oklahoma?
I am back in Wichita doing online school in my dorm.
That's so hard.
Which is, it was interesting. There was some hybrid classes, but essentially I was in my dorm doing classes.
Yeah.
And that the summer, if you're a theater major or like any arts major, the summer between your sophomore and junior year is kind of when you start to look for like professional internships, because like you want to like have job opportunities like when you graduate. And so I was looking for like legit theater internships and summer stock and stuff like that, and I was not really getting any bites. But I kept getting emails from YM360 being like, hey, we have spots open. Would you be interested in coming back? Like, we hired you last summer, so we hire you again this summer. And I was like, straight up ignoring those emails. I was like, I attempted to do this last year. It didn't happen. I'm not doing it again. I need to do like theater things. So I got rejected from the last of my applications for any like theater internships. And this was around April. So like, if you think about it, summer camps start in like May-ish, like late May, April at this point. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to work at home, I guess, this summer. And then I get an email from YM360 being like, hey, we have one technical staff position that we have not hired yet. Would you want to get on for an interview? It'd be an expedited interview process. Like it would be different from the position that we originally hired you for. And so I was like, sure, why not? What could it hurt? I don't have a job for the summer. It could not hurt anything to talk to these guys. So I ended up getting the job. I had about a month to kind of just like get all my stuff together, pack my life into a suitcase for 3 months, and go to Birmingham, Alabama, because that's where the camp is based. So essentially what the visual producer position is camp videographer, camp photographer, LED wall person, and pro presenter, all wrapped into one position.
I love it. You're speaking my language.
It was a chunk of a position. But because theater and live event are so different, I had never touched an LED wall.
Wow.
I'd only barely touched a camera. I did not know what pro presenter was.
Love it.
And like at all. I did not even know pro presenter was a thing. And I get to Birmingham, and first day of training comes around, and I'm very nervous. I'm like, okay, so they're going to teach me how to like do all this stuff. And they hand me a computer, and they hand me 5 road cases worth of LED. And they said, put it together.
I said, you're like, How?
What do you mean? And so I was like, "Are you gonna teach me?" And he was like, "No, I mean, you can figure it out." I was like, "All right, guess I'm figuring it out." So I went over to the good old YouTube and I said, "Pixelflex LED wall, how to?" And I
Oh
learned
my
how to put it
gosh.
together. Luckily, a production
Thank you,
company came the
Google.
next day and taught me how to route it. But I put it together on my own.
That's
Um,
impressive.
it was a really good learning experience for me to just kind of be thrown into it. But yeah, I did that summer. It was an amazing summer. I met a lot of really great people. It was a hard summer. It's hard to be in a different
Yeah,
city every week for 10 weeks. There's
I can
obviously
imagine.
some spiritual warfare that happens with that because the enemy knows what you're trying to do and he wants to
Right.
discourage the people that are trying to like bring like these youths to Christ, and it's a
Mm,
difficult thing to do. But I had an incredible summer, and about halfway through it was like, okay, this is what like I need to be doing. This is
that's awesome.
absolutely my love. Like this is I hadn't felt that way about like a vocation or like a job before in my entire life. Um
Wow.
and at that point, I was like researching. I was like, okay, do I transfer schools? Do I drop out? Like, I'm halfway through college. Like, I none of the tech people that I know finished college, or
Yeah.
started college. I ended
Yeah.
up just sticking with college and doing that, but I found the Life Church internship and
It's
I
awesome.
had grown up around Life Church. It was literally across the street from my like the life like the the head honcho
The
central
main
campus
campus. Yeah.
was across the street from my house. There was a Life Church in my college town, and when I got back to school, I was like, I need to find a church, and I know that Life Church is a good church because I had heard some things about it, and I went and I immediately started serving. Like that was like the first thing I did. I
Wow.
was like, I still don't know a ton about tech, and I want to get back there. So I started out as a
That's
lighting
cool.
volunteer. And throughout my junior year, I started just working my way up. I got really into lighting. I ended up being able to do videos, so like ProPresenter and camera switching. And
It's
then
awesome.
I ended up starting to produce services just as like a
It's
volunteer.
really cool. Wow.
So that's what I did. I did it all four services on Sunday and on Wednesday nights for youth. That's just what I did my junior year. And I ended up getting the Life Church internship at the Central Campus. So I was a broadcast support intern. And so
That's
I
cool.
was on the broadcast support team, helping out with like video broadcast stuff, video production stuff, anything that was like live-esque is what I was doing because there was like a like
That's cool.
like a creative media team that did like a lot of post production like editing stuff. I was on like the live production team. So
That's
got
cool.
to learn Grand MA2. I got to learn a whole bunch of different systems. ProPresenter very heavily. But yeah, I did the Life Church internship for 6 months. So I took the first semester of my senior year off. I did online school while I was doing the internship. And then I went back to school for a second semester so that I could graduate. And while I was there, I was a remote contractor for them as a production assistant. Going a little bit back into the internship, there's a an all staff event called Family Reunion, and we contracted some technical staff out for that. And the lighting director at CCV at the time was the person doing our lighting, and so I got to meet with
Oh,
him and
cool.
talk to him, and that's how I followed CCV. So I followed CCV around my senior year. Like I was looking for a job at that point because like that's what you do your senior year of college. Like
Right.
you're like, hey, I need a job after I graduate. So CCV posted a thing about December that they were looking for production directors, and I read that application or I read the job description. And I was like, that absolutely sounds like me. Like
Yeah.
absolutely sounds like something that I would thrive doing. So I applied in January. It was a long application process, but eventually I got hired in June, late June of this year, and
Love
moved
it.
out and that's where I have been. I am now a production manager at a CCV campus, and I'm loving it. I'm still learning. That's just what you do as a technical staff, but I'm absolutely loving it. So it's a
That's
really
awesome.
long-winded journey of how I got here, but like looking back, it's like there's so many teeny little doors like 3 or 4 years ago that like I would have never thought would have opened. A small aside, because I forgot to add it. It's important. So the Ed Newton pastor that preached my junior year at South Padre Island,
Yeah.
Texas, when I was on tour, on staff, I went to the South Padre Island, Texas camp, and Ed Newton was the speaker. And that was the week
That's so
that I was
cool.
like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Also, he preached Colossians my junior
That's
year,
awesome.
and he preached Ephesians that year. And I took notes like in my Bible both years, and the books are right next to each other. And so like
That's crazy.
I had written January 2018 under my Colossians, and now in Ephesians it says January 2022. And so it was just
That's
kind of
so
like a
cool.
cool little callback. The Lord knows what he's but yeah, it's all of those like tiny little things that like led me to where I am now, and it's just look back on.
Well, and it totally reminds me of like that verse where it's like man will make plans, but the Lord will direct his steps. And it's like, it totally sounds like, it's like, okay, like you had a plan going one way and God just kind of put little steps to kind of guide you. And it reminds me of like when you're driving a car, you're not like swinging the steering wheel left or right. You're like making tiny little adjustments. And it's like, he first kind of put you in a position where you were like, hey, there is production stuff related to church, maybe outside of what I've experienced at my smaller Presbyterian church, but also at your Presbyterian church, you were diving into theater and getting more into that. And then you go to college for that, but then the stuff you're learning at college is kind of in the same ish realm as what you're doing. But then God was like, hey, I want to have you a little bit more of adjustment. Let's get you some live experience. Hey, you're going to meet this guy from CCV. Hey, like all of that stuff. Like, it just sounds like God was really like, okay, like from like the moment that you like first got into theater, God was like, I'm going to turn this into something completely like, not different, I guess, but like, I'm going to take this as a springboard and launch Alex into like something really cool. So that's powerful.
Yeah, it's super cool. And it's really one of those things that I kind of recently just saw all the pieces kind of go, and so I'm like, whoa,
yeah,
like I'm seeing that now. Like I wasn't seeing it in the moment. I was seeing like little things, but now I'm like sitting here, I'm in Arizona, I'm like in a completely different state, and I'm like looking back on my life and I'm like, whoa, that's like so awesome. So
that's really cool. And now you're by In-N-Out, which is a big deal as well. God put you by In-N-Out.
I do like McDonald's fries better, but In-N-Out burgers.
That's fair.
So good.
They're top notch.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been here for a bit. You've been in your new position as production manager at CCV for a little over a month now. And I know that there are some things that obviously you gotta keep on lock. So I'm not prying for non-public information, but is there anything coming up that you are allowed to talk about that you're excited to be working on in the coming months at CCV?
There's not any like projects that I'm like working on. I'm really just focused on like expanding my knowledge and stuff. I have a really heavy background in visual and lighting. And part of my job is like partnering with sound and helping make that like part of the experience. And I know very little about sound. And so my goal and like my project per se is to just kind of dive in and like figure everything out, like figure out sound. That's like cool. How does the band function? How do my engineers like want me to set things up? Like how, like just kind of getting that partnership going. That's really what I'm working on. Obviously it's September when we're filming this. And it's right about the time that Christmas prep starts happening. So just starting to think about Christmas and all of the fun things that happen with that season.
Yes. Christmas at CCV is very fun, and I'm excited for you to be a part of it because you're going to make it more fun. And that's going to be awesome.
Christmas.
I love Christmas.
So I'm ready to kind of dive deep and just be one of those Christmas people that starts thinking about Christmas in like October.
I love it.
That's just gonna be your life, is just thinking about Christmas all the time. And then
Yeah.
once Christmas is over,
Okay.
you start thinking about Easter.
Yeah. And seriously, so for you, and this is a little different because when I worked at a church, it was a collegiate church. And so Christmas was a big deal, but it definitely was not a major point of focus just because so many students were at home with their families. So most of our membership and guests were, Christmas was just a smaller service for us, even though it's technically a big one. So for you, your experience working with churches that aren't a primarily college demographic, like if you're thinking about Christmas starting in like September, October, is it like when you are off, I guess if you can turn it off, like, are you like,
Yeah.
I want to go get hot cocoa and I want to go see Christmas lights and I want to go do this and like get involved in the Christmas stuff? Or are you like, I need a break from Christmas because my work is Christmas right now? Like, what is that like for you?
I'm such a Christmas person. I will
I love
go
it.
look at Christmas lights. I will listen to Christmas music unironically in the middle of summer.
I love it.
I love decorating for Christmas. I think the thing that I like sit in during the Christmas season, especially like on church tech, is like there's like big technical aspects that need to get done that aren't like load-ins and stuff like that. They are
Mm-hmm.
directly related to the Christmas season, but they're not like Christmassy, if that makes sense.
Right.
This recent Christmas, like last year, was the first like real big Christmas event that I had been a part of. And just, I don't know, just to be able to sit backstage or sit in the booth and just witness people, and I saw this during Easter, to like have that impact on people and to just like have people like come in and just like they may or may not go to church the entirety of the year. Like that's like my big mission with like big
Right.
holidays that revolve around church. There's a lot of people that come into the church building that would never normally be there, just
Right.
because it's Christmas or just because it's Easter. And so that's my goal in doing Christmas like stuff, is like to be able to give those people a like a calm, like cohesive environment, non-distracting, that they can
Mm-hmm.
just experience the love of Jesus, even if it's just for that one night. Um,
Right.
and then and praying over them and hopefully seeing them again in the future. But just like to be able to have that environment, to be able to foster that, is like my goal for Christmas. And then there's like my personal Christmas where I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm gonna watch the Santa Claus movies. Um, just because they're
Yeah.
so I try to really hard, and that it's one of those things just working in ministry in general. Like you never want your job to negate your faith, because once
Right.
those two become one, it gets really hard to either do your job or it's really hard to maintain your faith. And something has
Right.
to give. And
That's such a good
so
point.
just having to figure out the balance between like your own personal faith and like why you do things and your job is a constant struggle when you're in ministry,
For
just
sure.
because yeah, it's really easy for them to become the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's like it's good that your own personal faith is involved in your job, but also you need to protect your heart and protect yourself,
Right. It's
spiritually and
like the
physically and all of
relationship needs to be so much more. Yeah.
that.
That's a
Yeah.
really great point. I love that. And I think that's so key because yeah, I think if you, I mean, that's why a lot of people working in ministry do experience burnout, you know, is just
Mm,
the thing that is the most life-giving thing in your life suddenly
mhm,
becomes you know, tasks and projects and um you know, it's, you know, Jesus wants a 24/7 relationship, not a 9 to 5 relationship. People in working in ministry do experience burnout, but I think the ones that don't are the people that have mastered exactly what you're talking about, which is like the separation of the
mhm,
job from the relationship. So that's key. That's really cool. And I think even just kind of segueing into because I love to even just kind of talk about maybe some creative faith takeaways, just for the kind of latter half of our episode. But you've got obviously a lot of experience both from internship and now your career working in that environment, working with churches, I think specifically that have both massive influence and plenty of technical expertise and training available. I know we've talked about this. This is something you're really passionate about, where we have this secular atmosphere with creatives that creatives are just vying to be the best at what they do. And often that comes at the expense of maybe holding others back from the skills and talents of the job, right? I've learned this, I've mastered this, this is for me, I'm going to be the go-to person for this. And so how do you believe that creatives in the church can fight against that culture of gatekeeping information in order to really see the Big C church as a whole thrive?
In general, that's something that I'm super passionate about, because like when I was trying to make that transition from theater world to production world, there was a lot of people that I was reaching out to. There was a company that I had reached out to at one point trying to do live event stuff, and they ghosted me. I got through like the whole process and then they never called me back. And so it's like there's a lot of, well, if I have to teach you, then it's not efficient for me and it's not worth it. And
right,
you just kind of have to learn it on your own. But a lot of, especially in tech, like live tech, like there are some people that can gain access to some of that equipment just on their own. But a lot of that equipment is like really expensive and very specialized. And so it's like you have to be in that environment. So I think churches have a very special like position on that, because there's a lot of churches with some fairly new tech that is like industry standard even across like secular environments like concerts and stuff. Like there are some things like that happen at like Taylor Swift concerts or the Super Bowl halftime show that like on a base level you can learn in a church environment.
That's really cool.
And so there's a unique opportunity to help kind of train people in that environment, but also like knowing that people are in church to like worship and do that kind of stuff. So it's like being able to foster that relationship, but also like if people are truly genuinely interested in what you're doing, then like show them the booth. I make it a point to like look out for people in the auditorium that are like trying to peek over top and like look at the console or look at what's happening on my side of things and invite them into that space. Be like, hey, are you
cool.
like interested in what's happening? Just be like, hey, like you're totally welcome to like come back here and like see what we're doing. I'll answer any questions that you may have about what's happening back here.
That's awesome.
And I just think that that's like a really neat opportunity that we have because it's really accessible. And just like the volunteers in general, like any, you can take it as far as you want. I have some volunteers that are just really happy to like be there on a Sunday and they really enjoy what they're doing. And then I have some volunteers that are like, I really want to know like why this does the thing that it does and why it's all connected and all of that kind of stuff. And like, I'm like able to give that information. I know that it is a very large struggle to like, well, I'm at the top of my game, and if I give this information to somebody else, they could take it and go further than me and potentially like take my job. But that's kind of, and I've heard this from a lot of people at CCV. It's like you want to be able to train your volunteers enough so that they can take your job. Like that's kind of the point. Like we if they're interested, that's what the Lord is calling them to do. Like don't impede that. Like that's not your job to do. Like train them, offload any information that you can, like help them grow in the areas that they want to grow in, because you absolutely have no idea where that could take them in the future. Even if it's not at your church, but somewhere else, or even like going off into like a secular environment and having that like church spirit in them, and then being able to like spread that in just like a secular environment as well. So it's just give your
that's
job
a great
away.
point. Yeah, no, and it's one of those things too where it's like God's gonna take somebody where he wants them to go, whether you like it or not. And so you either have the opportunity to be somebody that either held them back or helped them go where God wanted them to go. But either way, they're going to get there. So might as well might as well cooperate with the Holy Spirit in what that person what he's doing in that person's life. And I think you make such a great point. It's like we with the church being a place where it does provide a lot of runway for people that maybe might not have access to gain these skills in a secular environment, give them the opportunity to learn that. And if God puts them in a place where they can use those skills in a secular environment, then that's a place where the gospel gets put somewhere where it wasn't before. You know, it's like if I'm sure there's people that have, like you said, worked on the Super Bowl halftime show or are at a, you know, doing production at a major concert like Taylor Swift or Beyonce or something like that. And they learn those skills in a church, and they might be side by side, shoulder to shoulder with somebody that doesn't know the gospel, and just be doing life on life with somebody for a production that big, which probably is months and months and months and months of work side by side together. They get to experience Jesus through somebody that learned it at a church. And so I think that, yeah, you really hit the nail on the head there of just kind of both ends of let's help people go where God wants them to go, and let's see them soar, even if that comes at risk to ourselves, because ultimately it's about seeing kingdom growth, not just personal growth. So I think that's key. And I think specifically kind of toning in on, like, let's rewind it all the way back to maybe what you're talking about, the person who is peeking in on your booth, or they have an interest level. And I know that the learning process itself, and not that I think we're always learning. I think the moment you stop learning is the moment that you stop being effective, to be honest. But I think specifically looking at church production in the AVL department, like, it can so often zero in on technical skill or like program knowledge. And I can't speak for everybody, but I know for myself and many of the creatives that I know, it can be hard for creatives to focus on practicals when all we want to do is just go out and create. You know, like, I don't want to be watching YouTube tutorials. I just want to go shoot, like, stuff like that. So what is your recommendation for creatives that maybe are interested in those more technical kind of outlets, such as audio, video, lighting, who are maybe still trying to get the hang of the technical side of their positions, but how do they keep the creativity flowing, their excitement levels high, while doing the maybe not so fun part of the job, like studying equipment or doing technical training, stuff like that?
Yeah. I mean, that's a tough part of it. Just like reading manuals. Because there's been so many people that I've talked to. It's just like, oh yeah, I read manuals for fun. Or like, if I'm, oh, well, did you read the manual? I was like, no, I haven't read the manual. That's not what I do on my free time.
Right.
But just like, you have to get into the nitty gritty of it at some point. Like, that's the not fun part of it. Or just like what I do, and this may not be like completely recommended, but when I was working on learning Grand MA, I had my mentor create a show file for me. So it was completely separate. I couldn't screw anything up. And I just kind of pushed buttons until something happened.
That's awesome.
So, I mean, if you have a space that you can work by trial and error, and that's just how you work, then that's amazing. Just find a way, or find somebody that like is genuinely like good at communicating like how this works, because there's so many different learning styles. Because there are some people that can be like, oh yeah, I was told to do this step by step and I did it. And then there's people like me that can be told things to do step by step, but until I physically do it with my hands, it will not stick in my brain. So just like, if you have the opportunity to get your hands on it, get your hands on it. Get your hands on a piece of lesser tech. Because like Grand MA3 or Grand MA2, those are big industry standard consoles. But if your church or what you're learning on is like a Jan's Vista console, stuff's going to translate. So like, learn what you have access to as well as you can. Because like on the base level, patching is the same, or the concept of like the creative aspect of how lighting happens is the same. Or I say lighting because that's just like my main focus, but like regardless of what you have. If you have a whole bunch of par cans and some gels, learn how to use that creatively, because even if you have this super expensive, like state of the art tech, if you know how to make it work, but you can't make it look good, it's not doing what you want to be doing it effectively. So just, I mean,
Right.
going back to the basics, learning how to like create and just like using what you have available to you to become as best as you can as that one at that one thing. And then if you have the opportunity to move up to like a larger console, get all of the information and you're always learning, because there's always going to be a newer,
Right.
better piece of tech. So you're never going to
Exactly.
be there. There's never, especially in AVL and like photography or anything that involves the technology, you're never going to be there wherever there you think it is.
Yeah.
Like there's always a new piece of technology coming out, and they're coming out like quickly.
Yeah.
And so you're always
Yep.
going to be learning. And so that's my main encouragement to people that are like, oh, well, I'll never get it figured out. I was like, I don't have it figured out. There's no way I'm ever going to get it figured out. And so just like being in that learning / growth mindset constantly is like the biggest piece of advice that I can give.
That's awesome. I know a lot of your examples related to, lighting, because that's what you're used to. But I think, you're so right. It translates. Like if you know and understand what exposure does when you do the little slidey thing with your finger on your iPhone, it'll prepare you so much when you have a DSLR or a mirrorless camera in your hand, and you might have to learn new terms like ISO or shutter speed or whatever. But ultimately you're like, okay, I could tell that something's overexposed because I learned what overexposure looked like on my iPhone. Or, hey, I was working in audio and I understood what gain and reverb did, and now I'm at this level, and gain and reverb are still doing the same things. I just have different tools to manage it with now that are maybe a little bit more fine-tuned. And I think that's what it is. It's like the more technology comes out, the more you're learning, the more you get to really fine-tune the little details of what you've been learning all along. But if you never ever, if you wait until you have the right equipment in your hands to get that baseline knowledge, it's going to be a beast to learn. It's kind of, it reminds me of,
it's not like unlearnable, but you're learning the basics on top of like learning the system, if that makes sense.
Right. So. I mean, it's kind of like how much easier was it to learn algebra because you learned arithmetic in elementary school?
Oh, yeah.
It's the same deal. It's like, okay, you could learn it all at once, but that's a lot. You could take a couple steps, and you're still going to have to learn a bunch, and you're still going to have to study a bunch, and you're not going to get things right away just because you spent time learning something ahead of time, but it's going to make it a little less painless, so yeah.
100% agree with like your iPhone camera knowledge to like camera knowledge. Because that's such a great analogy. Because like everybody has access to a phone, everybody has access to a camera phone, and so it's like that was brilliant. I wanted to like applaud you on that. That's a good one.
Thank you.
I really like that.
And it's interesting too, because so I'm a part of a couple of different like online forums for church creatives, and even just today it was a question of I think someone had posted a question of what camera setups is your church using, and that was it. And so you get all of these different responses because there's so many churches of different sizes, different budgets, different experience. And, I went in there and I was like, hey, my old church was on Canon C100s and a Sony FX6. And now I'm at another church and we're using all Vericams, and then I scroll all the way down and they're like three iPhones and Switcher Studio was one of the answers. And it's like, okay, like there is a church out there using 3 iPhones and Switcher Studio. They're working with what they've got. And as they gain experience in that, there's totally room to like continue growing in that, and so I think starting small with what you got. So even just with like the iPhone analogy, that's even just a practical thing of their churches. Maybe people listening to this episode right now who they're working with iPhones right now, and it's like you can learn a ton of the stuff that you need to learn that are being used in churches like Elevation or Bethel that like you can do with the basic equipment in front of you. It's just a matter of, are you dedicated to learning it? And so, and
Yeah.
I think specifically thinking like with volunteers, like that's so key too, right? Like volunteers, and you've even shared this with me too. It's less about technical knowledge. And I mean, obviously if you have a volunteer that's like, yeah, I have so much experience with this equipment and
Yeah.
this is what I do for my day job, can I come help? You're like, absolutely. But if there's somebody that's like, I've never touched a lighting console in my life, but it looks cool and I love our church, can I help? Like,
Yeah.
that's really all you need, right?
Yeah, because like even like at a base level, just running things, it's just like what what can I do to make it cater kind of to that person, or just like to the situation, I think is a better way to say
Mhm.
that. Because like on a base level, ProPresenter is like PowerPoint essentially,
Mhm.
and all if I do my job right on the beginning of the week, it should just be spacebar or clicking through slides. But like again, if you start out with that, and then in a moment of the Holy Spirit, the band just starts to do whatever. Like the ways that, okay, they're going back to the chorus, so I'm going to go back to the chorus instead of like
Mhm.
just like slowly working that up. And so really, like, especially when I get volunteers that say like, yeah, I really love our church, I think that this is interesting, I have no idea what I'm doing, like my encouragement to them is like, I will teach you all that you need to know to be successful, and if you want to know more, I am so happy to let you know like what I know.
Right.
But I will teach you enough that you know that you're successful and it's not going to be a scary thing for you, because that is one of those things that's like, if you want to get involved, like, but I don't want to mess up the lighting because then everybody will know. Yes, everybody may know for 2 seconds, but like, also, I want you to be as successful as you possibly can. And one of my like main like quotes that I say is like, if I tell you to do something, like push a button, and it's wrong time to push the button, that's on me. That's not on you. And so you can
Yeah.
blame me because that's my job. It will never be on
Right.
you. If I tell you, hey, do this, and it's absolutely the wrong decision, that's me. I will own up to that. You will never have to own up to that yourself. And
Mhm.
so just like taking that like barrier off, because it can be scary, especially lighting purposes. They're very visual things. Like the whole
Mhm.
congregation sees it, and but everybody messes up. We're human. At the end of the
Right.
day, if the gospel is presented, that's what I care most about.
That's so
So
good. That's so good. Yeah. And I'd love to, I know we're kind of hitting the end of our time here, so I want to wrap, just even kind of really narrowing in, I think, on this volunteer aspect, right? Because I think
mhm.
volunteers are what make churches thrive, like, and no matter the size of the church. And I think production teams, especially on a volunteer level, can have different struggles arise no matter the size or budget of a church. So like
Mhm.
volunteers maybe at smaller churches can feel like they're dealing with limited resources or expertise. Volunteers at larger churches, however, might feel like they're maybe a smaller, more insignificant part of a mission that they really want to serve at the best of their capacity. And I know specifically we've been talking about like CCV, Life Church, like churches that provide an example of relatively, right, because I mean there's always gonna there's always a bigger fish, but relatively churches that are have a larger membership base, larger production budget. So I really want to kind of hone in on that side of the pendulum swing of churches and volunteers. So what would be your encouragement to a creative that's maybe at an entry level production position, right? Maybe they just started and it's a big church, big thing, like big production. They might have a very small role. What's your encouragement to someone on that level who's trying to find their place in a much larger team, and
Yeah.
instead of feeling like they're just a cog in the machine?
Yeah. Um, Two things. First thing, I know that like a lot of like especially larger churches, like if you're new, they'll start you on like a more base level kind of task or position. Take that position and learn it so well that you are the best person at that one position that you can possibly be. Have
That's
pride
good.
in what you're doing. If it's pushing spacebar over and over again to make sure the lyrics show up on the screen, do it with the most incredible timing that you possibly can. Like,
Mm-hmm.
make that your heart and soul and your worship. That is like the number one thing that I can say. Like, that is how you are serving your church. Because if
It's good.
you're pressing go on the space bar to make the lyrics pop up on the screen, that is allowing people to worship. That's allowing people to know what's coming next. That's allowing the band to know what's coming next.
Yeah.
So do that with the best of your ability. And then the second thing is ask questions. If you have somebody that is willing to like mentor you, take advantage of that. Absolutely. Ask
Good.
so many questions. Ask all of the questions, because like I would not be where I am right now without doing that. I started out essentially as a volunteer. When I was at Life Church, I started out on a Jan's Vista lighting console at a smaller satellite campus of Life Church. And that's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
I learned and I did the best that I could at that position. And then they were like, "Hey, we had somebody call out. Would you be willing to run PurpoCenter?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I knew both of those positions really well. And then going up and just like, "Hey, we need you to cover this," or "Hey, would you be willing to learn this?" Like, absolutely, just start. It's going to be a slow process at the beginning, but my encouragement is when you know something well and you can take pride in it, it shows. And then if you have the
Yeah.
opportunity to be like, "Hey, this is a new volunteer. We would love for you to show them what you've been doing," you can help grow that next team member that is wanting to learn. And so that's like, you're not just a cog in the wheel, you're a very important part of what is happening during the service. Because I've been in a position on staff where like, if there's not a volunteer in a position, it puts us in a more stressed out position, and things just, it's like a domino effect. Like,
Right.
the baseline of everything needs to get done. And even if it's a monotonous kind of task, or you think that it is, like if it doesn't happen, it can be obvious sometimes. And so,
Yeah.
but yeah, just, there's always going to be somebody wanting to learn. And if you can know what you're doing to the best of your ability enough to teach somebody else, that's, again, cog in a wheel is kind of like a fun term, because like each cog turns another cog that turns another one that turns another, and it just
Right.
keeps going. And so if one of them stops, then the rest of the chain behind them like doesn't function.
Right.
And so just maintaining that health and that passion is like the best thing that I can like try and get out there, and just be like,
Yeah.
just be motivated, no, be willing to learn and want to learn, because it will
Right.
always be learning.
Ugh, that's so good. That's such a mic drop. Like, what a way to end end the show. No, for real. Because I think I'm hearing like two. I think just like and I think what's cool is like this is all really great practical knowledge, but it's all like biblically based. You know, it's faithfulness with the little thing, and the body needs every part to function. Like those two things really coming together. And I think yeah, it's as creatives, I think we have a responsibility to like take pride, not in a prideful way, but I think in a like, man, like I have been chosen
Mm-hmm.
to be a part of this position, to do this job. Like the Lord ultimately is entrusting me with this, as my leadership is entrusting me with this. And I'm gonna do this to the best of my ability because I'm doing it for the Lord first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
And faithfulness in little things does really translate to faithfulness in the big eventually, you know. And it's like that's even kind of what you're talking about. It's like, yeah, you do this as a career right now, but it really did trickle down to, hey, how were you going to handle it as a first time volunteer on
Mm-hmm.
on a smaller console in a smaller church congregation, just trusting that God was going to use you where you were at. So I think that's awesome. Such a like I said, such a baller way to end an episode. And so as As we wrap, I just want to thank you first and foremost just for coming onto the show. You have such incredible insight and wisdom. I'm really excited for our listeners to get to experience it. I'm excited for your volunteers to continue to get to experience it as you're really building the production team at your CCV location. And yeah, just looking forward to seeing you continue to serve the kingdom in your new role at CCV. So thanks so much for being here. Seriously.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. It's been great to kind of talk about that. This is like the stuff that itches my brain. And so to be able to kind of share that with a larger audience is just awesome. I love it.
Yes, absolutely. And speaking of larger audience, to the listeners, as always, thank y'all so much for listening to the Creative Christian Podcast. If you like the content we're producing, please review and rate the podcast. It is the number one way to get this encouragement in front of other creatives just like you. And that's about all we've got for the show today. So until next time, keep creating. Coming up in 2 weeks on the Creative Christian Podcast, we're dropping a brand new segment of the show called The Drawing Board. The Drawing Board will be a solo segment just featuring me, you guys, and my microphone, where we'll dive deep into topics impacting Christians in the creative space today. On our first episode of The Drawing Board, we'll be diving into the differences between feedback and criticism and how creatives can make the most of both. Again, it drops in 2 weeks, so don't miss it. I'll catch you guys next time.